are all very pleased to have this first annual conference of Eurocase at your premises here in London at the Royal Academy of Engineering. And we are especially pleased to join you here at the new location. And you are indeed following your mission, that is moving engineering to the center of society. It's a very good mission. So here we are in the center of London, and we will enjoy your hospitality. And I wish to welcome all of you to this event, the 2008 Eurocase Annual Conference, How Can Europe Meet its 2020 Renewable Targets? A very timely and tricky question, which is on the top of the agenda, not only on the European level, but I would say all over the world. So can we make it? Well, that will be the discussion of the day. But before we start, I want to give just a few words about Eurocase. See about this working? Oh, this is me. And here we have the internet, the Eurocase website, where you can find us and interact with us. And we are nothing but a network. The European Council of Applied Sciences, Technologies and Engineering is a European non-profit making organization, and we have some national academies from 21 European countries joining in Eurocase. So this is a network. It is a permanent forum for exchange between academia, industry, and research. We have access to top-level expertise. We have some 6,000 experts, engineers, industrialists, people from the public sector, researchers coming from all over Europe being part of our network. And they are then the core of Eurocase, that is the members. The Secretariat is based in Paris. It's very small and operational, and at the very heart of Paris, in Grand Palais, Champs-Élysées. We are governed by a board where you have the top executives or representatives from each member academy. We meet, all of us, at least 4 times a year, and then we have the annual meeting, which is a new event, which starts here today with our first annual meeting, and that is something which we will continue to work with and make Eurocase more visible. And in between these meetings, we have lots of activities, both within the various member academies, of course, but sometimes we run projects, programs, or seminars jointly, but sometimes there are only a few of us involved in different activities. And why are we here? Why Eurocase? Well, our mission is to provide impartial, independent, and balanced advice on technological issues with a European dimension. Like today, for instance, when we are addressing a very timely issue on renewable energy through our annual event. But we also maintain or promote attention to excellence in engineering. For instance, we have been in charge of the administrative and the arrangement on the ICT prize, which I'm sure you are aware of, this prize in the information communication technology area, where we have for many years been in charge of setting up the prize and come with the candidates and also find the most prominent candidate. A prestigious prize which is set up by the European Commission for the most brilliant innovation coming from an ICT company. And that was going on for a 10-year period, and it ceased last year. So now we are focusing on other issues, but that took up quite a lot of our energy. But we also encourage and maintain excellence in the fields of engineering. Of course, that is a major task, and we do it by different ways. Today, or this year, we have followed closely the Bologna process, which is a kind of standardization method to make education in Europe say, having the same requirements for bachelor, master's, and PhD degrees, such that students can move around within the Europe and sign up at different universities, and their marks being treated equally. So that is an important thing. And also, an important issue to attract young Europeans into engineering careers. You know, that is a problem all over Europe. How do we get the best into the technology and engineering area? That has been a problem and will be a problem, and we are in different member academies working on this issue, and that is also at focus in Eurocase, and for instance the next annual conference, which will be in Stockholm, with the Swedish Academy will run, will focus on this issue. And in all that we do, we draw experience and best practices from the national academies. So the working format for Eurocase is projects jointly, website where you can interact both between academies but also externally, the platforms where we focus on specific issues like engineering education, energy and environment, which is the topic of today, and the annual event. So that is what we are doing. And here you find all the 21 national academies within Eurocase. And today we focus our attention on renewables and how Europe can meet its 2020 targets. And to this end, I welcome all our speakers, especially those coming from abroad, and with a special thank to our Commissioner in Energy, but I'm not so sure whether he is here yet. He will be here shortly. So we will have a full and interesting day, and with these words, I leave the stage back to Philip Greenwich, the Chief Executive of the Royal Academy of Engineering, to introduce your President.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd like first to welcome all of you to the Royal Academy of Engineering and our brand new home for the inaugural conference of the European Council of Applied Sciences and Engineering. We meet at a remarkable period of change and uncertainty. The immediate policy priority across the world must be to unfreeze the financial markets. However, this must not be done at the expense of longer-term but no less pressing goals. Some people view anxiety about climate change as a luxury afforded only to prosperous societies, as a rich man's problem. This is a mistaken analysis. Catastrophic climate change would affect us all, especially the world's poorest. Action on climate change is not merely a hedge against likely future environmental problems. It's a defense against the risk of social and economic upheaval on an unprecedented scale. The scientific arguments for immediate action on climate change are compelling, but in making our case to the public, we shouldn't be afraid to reach beyond the scientific facts to the implications for society. Because, at the most basic human level, we're trying to safeguard peace in our children's and grandchildren's generations. Next year, world leaders will meet in Copenhagen to draw up a successor to the Kyoto Treaty. The challenge to preserve peace and stability should be uppermost in their minds. Politics are particularly difficult at the international level, but there are important precedents for action. In 1944, statesmen from many countries met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to stave off global economic collapse following the strains of the Second World War. They created institutions which underwrote a period of growth and prosperity in most parts of the world, lasting 60 years or more. The EU had similar origins. The establishment of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951 was rooted in in a vision that economic solidarity was the best way to countervail the forces of nationalism and militarism that had wrought so much destruction in Europe. Now, 60 years later, the successors to the EU founders, Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman, have been confronted with another threat to peace and stability: climate change. Their response came in a historic agreement in March 2007, fleshed out in January 2008 in the Commission's Climate Action and Renewables package, a package which, as we speak, is in the final stages of negotiation, with legislation expected in the next few months. One of the most far-reaching aspects of the package is the commitment to meet 20% of Europe's total energy needs from renewable sources by 2020. Today's conference will look at the renewables target from an engineering perspective. But first, a word needs to be said about the broader context in which the package is appearing. We're living through probably the greatest period of change and uncertainty in energy I've witnessed in my career so far. Change is occurring in just about every conceivable dimension, but I'd like to single out three: the energy mix, players, and politics. Having been fairly static over the past 3 decades, the energy mix is becoming increasingly diversified over time. All energy sources, high carbon and low carbon, have been growing in recent years in response to demand. But low carbon energy sources have been growing much faster: solar power at around 40%, wind and biofuels at 30%. Diversification is happening for two principal reasons. First, high oil, gas and coal prices, which have been passed through to the costs of the two sources of delivered energy, electricity and transportation fuels. And second, rapid cost reductions in low carbon technologies as they've scaled up. Costs have come down around 20% every time their capacity has doubled. As a result of these factors, gas, coal, nuclear and renewable energy sources will soon be competitive with each other, an outcome being accelerated by carbon pricing. Transportation fuels are currently 95% reliant on oil, but diversification is happening here too, most significantly through the introduction of biofuels, which this year will provide the single biggest increase in liquid fuels production outside of OPEC. At the same time, high energy prices, coupled with climate change and energy security concerns, are leading to significant improvements in energy efficiency. US gasoline demand may already be in long-term decline, in large part because the US car fleet is becoming so much more efficient. It is, as always, very difficult to predict the future direction of the oil price, still the most important pricing benchmark in energy. Oil, as with all commodities, is a highly cyclical business. But it's a fact that oil extraction costs have risen dramatically in recent years and are likely to rise further as production migrates to ever more technically challenging places. This factor alone suggests that we're unlikely to see a dramatic long-term fall in the oil price in the foreseeable future. Dramatic changes are also taking place along the second dimension, which I'd like to talk about: energy market players. In oil and gas, national oil companies are increasingly calling the shots. These companies now control as much as 80% of known reserves. In renewable and alternative energy, there are 1,500 clean tech funds backing a panoply of solar, wind, wave, tidal and biomass technologies. There are also a plethora of new players, ranging from fund-backed startups to software companies investing in energy efficiency to agri-businesses backing new biofuels technologies. We don't know yet which approaches will be successful. Who will be the first player to create a renewable energy major? How quickly will regional businesses emerge in European renewables or global businesses in biofuels? The final dimension of change is the enhanced role of governments throughout the energy sector. Governments are reverting to historical precedent by becoming more interventionist, and the energy market is no exception. The increasing geographic concentration of supplies and their dislocation with key consuming nations is leading to political interventions in energy markets on both the supply and demand side as energy security concerns mount. At the same time, climate change concerns are leading to a proliferation of fiscal and regulatory policies designed to promote energy efficiency and alternative energy supplies. Some people argue that governments should go even further. They see green Keynesianism, large-scale government spending on low-carbon projects, as a means to pump prime economies during the impending economic downturn. So we're in the midst of a great deal of change, and when so much is new, unclear and uncertain, it can be difficult to see the path ahead. At times like this, societies look to principles to help them navigate. As Europe's politicians, business people, NGOs, scientists and engineers grapple with the energy and climate package, I'd like to suggest 4 such principles during my remaining remarks today. The first is, establish a level playing field in energy. The most important step is pricing in the externality of carbon dioxide emissions, a cost which would otherwise not be recognised by the market. And that means a basket of measures tailored to different sectors, including fiscal policies and regulations. There is no silver bullet. Cap and trade schemes have emerged as the preferred approach to reap carbon savings from large stationary emitters. The EU has led the world on this front, but the EU emissions trading scheme is in danger of stalling. To make a real difference, it's essential that the lion's share of its carbon permits are auctioned rather than given away for free. Establishing a level playing field will also require removing barriers that are hindering the deployment of low-carbon energy sources. For example, grid regulations designed around the needs of high-carbon incumbents and cumbersome planning laws. Obstacles to the regional trading of power within Europe and the global trade of biofuels must also be removed. Finally, a critical step in establishing a true level playing field is dismantling subsidies on fossil fuels based on energy sources. A little-known fact is that, globally speaking, such subsidies total to more than $200 billion a year, compared with only $33 billion for renewables and nuclear. The second key principle I'd like to mention is the importance of promoting accelerated technological innovation in energy. As we know from other sectors of the economy, new technologies require carefully targeted transitional incentives to accelerate their development and deployment. Again, there's no silver bullet. A basket of feed-in tariffs, mandates and capital grants will be needed, depending on the nature and the maturity of the technology and on the broader policy context. A particularly large challenge is getting incentives right for carbon capture and storage. This absolutely critical technology is currently stuck on the starting block because of a lack of policy support. It seems to me that the next step is to fund a number of CCS demonstration projects, something explicitly recognised in the EU package. And the most effective way to do this will be for governments to give out capital grants to promising projects, while at the same time assuring the long-term competitive position of CCS by including it in the EU emissions trading scheme. Of course, dispersing the grants required, perhaps totaling €1 billion each, will be very difficult politically, especially in strongly representative democracies. Earmarking a portion of revenues from auctioning carbon permits is emerging as a favoured approach. And whichever mechanism is chosen, it should balance the need for alacrity with the need for transparency and fairness. As well as carefully targeted incentives, collaborative technology networks across Europe will be essential to complement national efforts. And the role of the Strategic Energy Technology Plan and the newly established European Institute for Innovation and Technology will be crucial in that regard. The third principle is to harness the power of the market, but to do so in the right way. Markets are the most effective delivery units available to society, but they must be properly regulated. In my view, green Keynesianism is not the right answer. Rather, policymakers should set clear, stable and predictable rules coupled with penalties for breaking the rules. Then the market, private enterprise, should be left to deliver the outcomes required within the rules that are laid down. That's what the EU's 2020 targets do, and that's why they're so important. It's a clear example of clear, stable and predictable policy, and the market is already responding. For example, the pool of the targets is largely responsible for the progress made in offshore wind in this country and others bordering the North Sea over the past couple of years. Reneging or dismantling the targets that have been announced, or making them indicative rather than binding, would, in my view, be a big mistake. It would damage the investing environment in renewables in Europe for a generation. One place where there is particular risk of this happening is biofuels. I believe biofuels can and should play a critical role in global efforts to combat climate change and enhance energy security. But their potential is being hampered by alarmism and misunderstanding. Concerns about bad biofuels are justified, but the right way to distinguish between the good and the bad is through clear, stable and predictable CO2 and sustainability standards, rather than making sweeping negative policy changes. The fourth and final principle I'd like to talk about this morning is the importance of global leadership. Reducing greenhouse gases to a safe level will be impossible without a global agreement at Copenhagen next year. Equity issues have emerged as the greatest stumbling blocks in those talks. How the costs of cutting carbon should be shared between developed countries, the source of most emissions to date, and developing countries, the source of most emissions in the future. And I believe Europe could make a tremendous difference here. As a global first mover in climate change targets, the EU has the credibility to be a leader in international negotiations. As the first region to have adopted an international carbon trading system, it also has the practical experience. And Europe has important political experience. It's used to operating in a world of overlapping sovereignty, to striking a balance between supranational institutions and member state governments. Such experience will be critical, because I believe addressing climate change will be impossible without enhanced international climate institutions able to manage, monitor and verify national and regional efforts. So I continue to see Europe at the vanguard of global efforts to address climate change, despite the pessimism we've heard in some quarters in recent weeks. As the world faces up to the challenge of stabilizing CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, our watchword must be solidarity, a term that's fundamental to the vision of the European Union and also appropriate for today's gathering of scientists and policymakers from many different countries. During our discussions today, we should remember the words of one of Europe's founding fathers, Jean Monnet. He said that his main objective in life was to, and I quote, make men work together to show them that beyond their differences and geographical boundaries, there lies a common interest. And it's my sincere hope that our current generation of leaders also takes heed of those words. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for this chance to speak in front of such a distinguished audience. I will start perhaps with a package that Lord Browne kindly mentioned. In January 2008, the Commission proposed a package of directives that would implement its 20-20-20 targets, 20% of renewable energy, 20% greenhouse gas emissions, and 20% improvements in energy efficiency, all to be achieved by year 2020. The Commission analysis shows that these 20% targets are feasible. But I'm going to focus more on renewable energy target. In a way, in debate now, it is the easiest and at the same time still more questioned target from all the targets that we have put. Well, there is also a sub-target, as you know, for 10% of renewable energy in transport sector. Why it was seen the transport sector deserves particular target. Lord Browne spoke a lot also about the EU-wide market and individual actions. And if for electricity, and particularly for heat, we really see national markets. For transport, well, it's not so obvious that it is very national markets. Basically, it is EU-wide market. So that's why transport was seen particular, not because of some lobbying of biofuels, but mostly because for transport it would be much more cost efficient to take the measures on the whole EU level. Well, our analysis suggests that in EU we could have by 2020 around 34% of electricity produced from renewable energy sources, of which 12% would come from wind. We would see strong growth from combined heat and power, installation using biomass. Solar, as we will hear today, will play its role, and we expect the costs of solar energy to decline by 50% by year 2020. I think it's very much important to also look on renewables in the heating sector. That could double to around 18% using more biomass, efficient combined heat and power, and district heating. And I was quite thrilled to read the response from National Grid on the consultation paper for possibilities to UK to achieve the target. And they strongly emphasize one particular possibility, using biomass for providing 1/3 heat in this country. So mixing natural gas with biogas, and this is sometimes overlooked, because when we speak about renewable energy, usually people concentrate only on electricity. Electricity is the only sector that we are looking at, and heating, our cooling sector, is quite often forgotten. I expect also that renewables in the transport sector could expand quite significantly, using both biofuels and also electricity on hydrogen. This perhaps is the most difficult sector recently in the southwest of England, looking for the perspectives for 2020 for this particular region. All the analysis shows that yes, we can reduce the demand for electricity. Yes, we can reduce demand also for heating. But in transport sector, they envisage that consumption in this particular region in UK will increase by 11%, with all the measures taken. So this is particularly the sector that closing our eyes and saying, well, this sector should be postponed and we should look at this sector later, actually is not an option. So we should also be very careful, at the same time clearly understanding the transport sector is crucial to achieving all the goals that EU energy policy has mentioned. It is sustainability, because without addressing transport sector and just by energy efficiency measures, we will not achieve considerable reduction of CO2. It's also for security of supply, because the most dependence of the European Union is not in natural gas, it is in oil. It is really where the challenge is, and we can't replace today oil in transport sector at all. So it's very important to see that there is a clear need to act, and we have these opportunities. But it's always good to look what we have achieved at this stage, because EU is weak and strong at the same time. Weakness, it comes that, well, it's 27 national member states that very much care about sovereignty. But the strength comes that each of them develop different policies. And in some ways it's a very remarkable one that really is worth studying or taking the best examples. And I would put a couple of examples, because some of you it's very well known, but just to try to see that we are already rich in experiences. In Spain, well, always we speak about variability of wind energy. Wind energy today in Spain provides about 10% of electricity on an average day. But on the 18th of April this year, and it was a Friday, the contribution of wind reached 32% of Spain's power need. And Spain, if you would see, is actually very isolated in the EU market. It recently only made breakthrough connecting Spain potentially with bigger capacity with France, but it is really difficult to accommodate such a huge flow of energy, wind energy. And how they manage it? It's very clear that it was completely different grid management strategy, including forecasting and definitely investing in particular equipment. And another strong way where Spain, I think, example is leading, but you will have today also the presentation, I mean the solar thermal power generation. Well, I know that Latvia will be always, I believe, out of the solar belt. But for a lot of countries, it provides immense opportunities because the scale is different. The scale and methodology used is different. And Spain, example, sees two areas, integration of wind energy in limited area and also progress on solar thermal is remarkable. France. France it has a lot of not only successes in the issues related to the nuclear energy, but I would just mention one small project. It is Tidal energy project in Reims that has been supplying renewable electricity into French national grid since 1967. It's modest in size, but it produced electricity cost is approximately 12 euro cents per kilowatt hour. And I know why I mention it, because there is a lot of debate on Severn estuary. What could be achieved. I know that there is a lot of challenges, but not to use a tidal energy potential would be wrong, but it should be done definitely in the right way. Portugal. Portugal is one of the countries that have really made the breakthrough in developing the system of support and reaching remarkable levels on the use of renewable energy. But Portugal inaugurated recently the world's first wave farm, consisting of 3 wave energy converters. Well, it's not a big one, so it could supply only 1,500 homes today. But it's already the second phase that wishes to go to 21 megawatt hour. And that means that is much more homes could be supplied by wave energy. It is a new source, but it definitely shows that we can harness it. Denmark example. In Denmark this time I would not speak about windmills because usually it's perceived. Because the renewable energy target in a way encouraged 2 ways of action. One is on supply side, but it's very clearly on demand side. And speaking with Danish industry, they said, well, always you speak about this flex securities, that is Denmark, is particular social model, very dynamic, at the same time also very well perceived by whole population. But our biggest achievement is actually, he said in Denmark, that since 70s oil crisis, we have not increased energy consumption. This is our achievement. We never forgot what the oil crisis brought to us. And how they do it? Well, I believe that one of the good examples is that 75% of Denmark's heating, district heating, is produced in combined heat and power plants that generates both heat and electricity, and 40% of this is without any CO2 emissions at all, thanks to the use of biomass. So basically, this combined heat and power technology raises 40% rate of efficiency to 90%. And so less fossil fuels is used and less CO2 is emitted. So in a way, this Danish example very clearly demonstrates that all these targets, renewable energy sources, greenhouse gas emissions, and energy efficiency is very much well linked. But there are some particularities, and I will speak later, why we still need 3 targets, not just 1 target. Then is always a question about potential. And it is good not to offend anybody, but just go to the country you know better. Because Latvia is one of the countries that usually is perceived, well, the potential is limited, there is no particular solar, there is no so much wind, so where the renewable energy could come, with the exception of the big hydro projects that they have already there. But Latvia is by 55% of surface area is covered by forests. And a recent study presented to me suggests that between 33% and 60% of Latvia's total energy consumption could be potentially met by indigenous biomass. So it's a huge potential that is not used for different reasons, because it's not so easy also to use this potential. There is a potential, but you need to pick it up and transform it to energy. And it definitely requires a lot of investment. But that means that talking that there is no potential is wrong. There is a potential, and it's not only wind potential. There is biomass, there is sun. So there is potential, and we should be more ambitious and open our eyes on the issues we never looked before. Well, what is the main elements of this legislative package for renewables? First, a stable policy regime. Legally binding targets for each member state to be fixed. Why legally binding? Well, one reason that sometimes a bit surprises me is that on all the debate, for example, that we have now on biofuels, people tend to forget for 2010 we have a target, still legally it's there. Nobody has changed this target. It's 5.75% of biofuels to be used in the EU in 2010. But it's indicative. Why it's nobody cares? Because it's indicative. Well, would 2%, 1%, 3%, who cares? The binding changes the nature of policymakers and also the industry to address it. So if it goes not from binding, it doesn't make any sense, because that it will stay as a biofuels target just to take a note for in the Commission report where we stand. I believe some measures will be taken, some developments will be taken. But if we continue with policy as option like now, I again will come to the example of this particular region in England that I have visited. They say current policies will make 5% of renewable energy in southwest of England. 5%. If you go with binding policies, with real policies, you can achieve even 20% of renewable energy penetration in southwest of England. So you see the difference, and that's why the target is so crucial. Well, there is also, each country has its particular targets. There is a lot of debate, or was debate, what methodology should be used. Well, we use the fairest methodology how to distribute the 20% targets for European Union. The ones that could be acceptable to all the countries. It's not perfect, but I believe it's fair enough that each and every country could reach its target realistically by 2020. But it's not only the targets that are necessary. Well, we require that member states to prepare national action plans which spell out how the targets will be reached. There are no prescriptions on the EU level on the sectoral shares of electricity, heating and cooling, transport, but member states will have to assess and determine for themselves where the growth will come from. And they will also have to explain, if the directive will be adopted, what the shares will be and what instruments will be used to ensure the targets are reached. Also, the directive, sets an indicative trajectory. Well, it is our experience from previous times that if you don't have indicative trajectory, so that there is a risk that some measures will be taken so late that, the target will be missed. And then the question will always rise, why we have not done some steps earlier. So I believe that this trajectory helps, first of all, the voters and citizens of the country to see how my country is coping with this policy. And second, perhaps I should be not mentioning it, it gives also the opportunity, the Commission to make encouragement of these member states to really to take some measures, or at least to discuss what's going wrong. What are the reasons why the developments are not as they could be expected? Second, And this is a bit controversial as well, because Browne said it's about the, well, market should be, well, EU-wide market with as less interruption as possible. So it is always debate where the flexibility should be and most cost-effective way. We followed, well, different levels of flexibility, taking in particularity two major concerns that we have. Well, first of all, we are at the beginning of the policies. We are at the beginning of the policies, and we still face a situation where the technology uptake should be made, and countries are so different policies that establish, well, complete flexibilities, well, in the EU-wide market will be rather difficult, because in some countries there are some schemes that only now produce fruit. For example, Sweden took quite a lot of time to really develop the green certificates. Now to come with different model would like to bring all the work done by this government to such sectors. At the same time, we need also to encourage that member states cooperate together, and I believe that after 2020 we will not need perhaps such a particular measures. So member states are free to decide on the instruments and measures to be used. Well, there is a limitation. There are guidelines for state aids, for environmental support, but that is the only rules that actually they should follow. In these guidelines, actually, if they stay, the member countries are allowed to use a measure of support that, well, is necessary. At the same time, guidelines developed by the Commission help that there is not too much perturbation in the market, or the perturbation are on the tolerable level. So it's not that it's completely free to each member country to go to the scheme. And we have seen also the perturbation. I see José here. We discussed also some time ago in Spain that the biomass from Spanish region traveled to UK. Well, because UK proposed, well, better feed-in or whatever tariff, whatever the support scheme used in UK made biomass travel from Spain to UK. Does it make sense? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. So the scheme was, well, not good, well enough adjusted, because basically we are looking that we use renewable energy sources that are located in the territory of member country, not that. Basically, we are looking that we use renewable energy sources that are located in the territory of member country, not that we transport huge demands of masses of biomass for producing heat or power. It's not the basis of the whole support scheme. What was the result? The Spanish scheme was forced to be adopted accordingly to biomass states paying. So this is, I think, where we face the challenges that we need to follow. But it's really that scheme provides for flexibility to cooperate between member countries to develop bilateral or multilateral projects. Also, we go so far as the transfer of overachievement by one member state to compensate for underachievement in another. And I believe these all options of flexibility, at the same time allowing each member country to be complete control of support scheme used, is the best possible way. It's not the ideal way, but it's because of different technologies being used, I think it is the best way. Because we still, and it is Royal Society of Engineering, is clearly there is a lot of engineering tasks. It's not that we have perfect equipment, we have perfect technologies, and just need to apply. We know that there's still a lot of engineering work needs to be done before we really say this is a scale for using broadly in EU-wide market. Well, we also modify the existing regime for electricity to ensure that electricity imported from third countries can count towards member states' renewable energy target. In a way, it is a response to what Lord Browne called us for leadership. Leadership is not only in making speeches and doing some words, but also providing for credible mechanisms to really to use these policies. And again, good example. There is a country, Burkina Faso. Well, for Burkina Faso, Portuguese project would be huge energy project. Burkina Faso is not close to the ocean, so they can't use wave energy. But small solar project in this country, 2 megawatts, would make a huge difference in this country. And that's what we try to do with our, Burkina Faso is a bit too far, but North Africa is not so far, or Ukraine is not so far, Albania is not so far. And these countries have renewable energy potential that will be difficult for a lot of reasons to use at the first stage. But if we are able to develop the schemes that produce energy, and we at the same time, at the end of, through electricity interconnection, are using this energy consumed counts towards the target. So it means that the scheme is not closed only in the EU itself. It provides the possibilities for developing the projects in neighboring countries, in this way bringing our policies further. I think one of the biggest challenges, and why I'm speaking particularly is the need for renewable energy, it's not only about targets, where the biggest challenge is in administrative and planning regimes. And national grid response to the consultation procedure actually says we need to change the way how we approach to the planning of the grid even. Because usually you get approval of the project, then you start building, and then you come to the grid. Now the things are different. You need to come with the grid where the potential is, expecting that there will be investments made. I know that it's a challenging task, but that's how they need to change from planning regimes. And administrative regimes as well. Again, example from southwest of England. For windmills, it's nightmare to get an administrative procedure clear. Because whenever you start a new project, you are faced that you are not only responding for environmental impact assessment of your particular wind farm, but also for combination with the other wind farms in a way that makes your task incredibly difficult. I'm not speaking about only costs that it related, but it makes actually nightmare for developer to have such a project to get approved. And the directive says, actually, for each and every country, please bring procedures that are friendly to it. Not that you abolish procedures, that you don't care about the impacts that renewable energy projects would make, but streamline these procedures, make one-way shop or whatever to make that these procedures are easy and credible, but not different ways. They are less credible and impossible to us. So I believe that it is a very important part of the directive. Why renewable directive is important, because this is a crucial stage where actually projects has a chance or does not have a chance. And today, I would say in a lot of places in the European Union, it's still the case that it's very, very difficult to have favorable planning procedures or administrative procedures to have. Well, it's also a grid issue. We have legal framework, but it's really also challenging because it's particular role of regulators. I like regulators, but I also would not like to have this electricity energy regulators to have this job by myself. Because from one side, you need to slash the costs, so that you have all the interest to get the tariffs cut for transport of electricity. From other point, if you would like to have a new project to emerge, you should allow also to invest and strengthen the grid. So that means that regulators need to balance both. But if it's not legal obligation to look then for integration of renewable sources, they will stay only with the first obligation. They will not go for the second, because then they will be criticized that they allow the grid cost to increase. And I believe that legal certainty is necessary. Well, it is also a question about biofuels. Is very strongly addressed in the directive. I still believe that the Commission proposal was the most balanced. Actually, we said it should provide for greenhouse gas saving, 35%, 50%. I think it's demanding enough for 35% in the first stage, because we also know that, well, there are voices saying, let's wait until the second generation biofuels will come, and then we will start the framework. The development usually goes through the stages. If I see the windmills, the first windmills have been, well, small, not very beautiful, and, well, reliability was not there still. And with each development, it's achieved remarkable development. It's the same is also for biofuels. We start with the first generation, moving into second generation. It does not mean that we need to go very fast. We need to go very, very cautious curve. But basically, it is a way how to deal with it. But for biofuels, we address the issues that I believe is more than ever important, sustainability of resources. Biofuels, in a way, in my opinion, is made a scapegoat, well, perhaps wrongly, very wrongly. We need more food in the world. If I need more food, we need more, well, meat, for example. For meat, we need feedstock, soya. So if it goes for soya, then indirect land use is fine. If it goes to biofuels, it's wrong. Well, is it logical? Because at the end we lose our rainforest anyhow. So that believes that what we addressed, it is a sustainability criteria placed. Greenhouse gas savings, not to use a land with high biodiversity, not to use land with carbon stocks will be released. Well, it could be shaped one way or another, but I believe this approach is correct. But it's also correct that we need to think for all types of resources in the same way. It's not just saying, well, we will not allow biofuels to be used. Well, we have not such opportunity. If the costs will be good, and in Brazil they are using biofuels, we can't ban biofuels in the world. So Brazil will anyhow continue to produce with our target or without our target. And I believe it's more important to achieve international acceptance of the targets for sustainability, for producing and use biomass in general. I think this is where the challenge is, because otherwise we will always be late and the damage will be done. So I believe that it is an important part of the package. It will very much debated in the Council and Parliament, but these are the debate. I know that French presidency is trying now to agree on the whole package. Now there is informal trialogues between Commission, Parliament and Council started. So it will be rather difficult way because Parliament has voted only in the committee. So it means that also negotiator from Parliament will always need to have his eye how the plenary could vote. So it is very, very tricky situation. But there is a good political will to agree in January, so that in December, during the French presidency, and they finalize early next year. And today, I would say the chances are very good. I mean, not only renewable energy, because it is only one part of the package, but also on ETS, on CCS, and also the issues related to the CO2 reduction in non-ETS sector. So I believe that the package is mature enough to find this agreement. I would mention another point that sometimes is forgotten, and I believe that it is also important always to have in mind when we address renewable energy. Because in some countries there is true, the potential perhaps is rather expensive to get. But where the potential is definitely there and easy to achieve, and the countries that I am living, like Belgium, is particularly should be advised to go in this way, it's energy efficiency. We do quite a lot in this area. Well, we still have standards for cars in the Parliament and Council. We have labeling regimes. We have eco-design minimum efficiency standards, energy efficiency codes for the buildings. Action is being taken, and it will be strengthened by the second strategic energy review. But I would like to mention one particular focus on this, that humans, well, are still humans, and they like to see some benefits from everything. And there is a good example from French support scheme bonus malus for cars. Well, you can say, is the most efficiency, but just to show the example, what was the impact of this bonus malus system in France for cars. Usually France, with all the measures taken, could reduce overage emissions from the cars fleet 1 gram of CO2 per kilometer. The year they applied the scheme, they achieved 9. So it's 9 years achievement. Well, you would say perhaps it would slow down in next years. But it was in the year where people were being quite cautious to buy new cars. As we know, the car manufacturers face particular challenge as people are reluctant actually to change their car today for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that could be So people will buy more or less the same car. They would like to have something new. And I believe car industry actually offers not only more luxurious cars, but perhaps cars that are more differently kind of, designed and also powered or by hydrogen or by electricity. Now the issue of costs. Cost is usually mentioned as one of the issues that we can't afford now. We have recession and costs will be too high. It's true that each implementation of the package is cost. But usually I think the best example, and I have never heard anybody challenge it, is Stern's report. Stern's report in general says what are the consequences. If we do, it costs 0.something% of GDP for the impact of the cost. If we don't do, it's a cost for society is from 5 to 20% of GDP. And I believe this is really clear macroeconomic analysis that shows, well, if you do these measures, you actually provide for growth, not different way around. And if we see now the government challenges, and a lot of countries' governments are saying, well, we need to create the jobs, we need to create the development, we are looking for new opportunities. What sectors then we are looking for? The ones that already has difficulties in the current economic circumstance, or for possibility creating a new opportunity and new jobs. And if you would see all the countries that really have gone in as a renewable energy policy and energy efficiency, all are net creators of jobs. Net creators of jobs, and the developments have been quite remarkable because it gave also the opportunity for one of segment of society that we speak a lot, but sometimes doesn't provide too much instruments. I mean small and medium-sized enterprises. Because the change in renewable energy requires a lot more advice, a lot more installers, a lot more developers. So it completely changes this structure. So I believe that actually just look what the package costs money doesn't provide the real answer. I believe if somebody would like to challenge, he or she should go for Stern's type of the report saying, well, if you do this, you come to different results, society will suffer. But Stern's report is still, for me, point of reference, and I believe for the college as a whole. So that means, in my opinion, that in current economic slowdown and seeing the challenges that we face in the energy sector, and particularly in volatility in the oil price, that is definitely not good signs. That means that there is something fundamentally wrong in the supply-demand situation. And it does not mean necessarily that it will improve in the medium to long-term future. That there is particular need to act now, especially when governments tries to accelerate government spending programs. And that would be wrong now to invest in new roads or new skyscrapers, but it was really need invest in energy sector. So I believe that it is very clearly where we should go. And I would like to conclude with not very correct example, but I think in a way it is reflecting where the challenge we have. My political life started actually, well, if you could call it political life, I was not in prison, but still late 80s under Gorbachev have been decent times. So you can speak more or less what you think, so I wouldn't say that it was particular courage of myself, from my side. I was not expecting to be sent to Siberia at the time. So the basic was question meeting the audience, rather small, not huge audience, but it was well around 50 or 60 people. There was a question asked to me and said, well, could we continue to be in the Soviet Union? I said, well, no, but I don't know how to get out of it. And it was quite logical because we have had small nation, huge Soviet machine, no chance whatsoever. But what happened in the years afterwards? The whole Latvian nation has mobilized itself. They have been, well, a Baltic Road, the people standing hand in hand. There have been different actions that completely changed, and what was completely unbelievable happened. And I believe something like this we face in renewable energy, and also this new fight against climate change. Well, it seems impossible task. When you go on the street of London, you see, you can't change it. You see the building, you can't change it. You see this, it's impossible. But still, if it's a lot of people are involved, and people, I believe, all people on the street, that is important, that they believe that the measures are taken are right in their favor, the change will come. Perhaps it will take longer than regaining Latvia's independence, that's for sure. But it's still comparable task. It's something that is unbelievable, could be achieved. And I believe today's seminar is very important for, because engineering shows what is possible, really possible today in the medium term and longer term. And we really need to accelerate the thinking in this area to help politicians like me, like my colleague, to be really more ambitious and saying, well, it could be achieved. So for you, I wish also success that you convince us that really it's doable. So thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a very successful conference, and thank you very much for inviting me.